Good morning and welcome to the Roadmap MBA. My name is Ashleigh King and I am delighted to be a guest presenter on this show. So I'm so happy to see anyone watching today, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching on replay. Please feel free to leave a comment and say hello. It would be really nice to see who's watching. It's my 5th time doing one of these. So I'm really enjoying them. I have to be honest, it's been a massive learning curve. Live presenting is not as easy as I thought it might be. I'm used to being in the interview seat where I am, either hosting a podcast episode or interviewing someone. So to actually have the opportunity to twice a month create some content and prepare and plan what I want to talk about and have the freedom and creativity to do that is just such a pleasure. So yeah, it's great to see if you're watching today. As I said, it's my 5th time, and please do say hello if you can. It's always nice to see who's watching. So I wanted to talk today about something that's really important to me, and I'll tell you why it's important. So I'm going to be talking about the importance of being mindful about burnout and how we can prevent it, but also why it's so prevalent in MBA classrooms, but also in the workplace, what that means for the future of work and how we can maybe prevent some of that or fix some of that. And just some of the top tips I've learned about burnout myself. So I feel that I've got a very unique and different perspective to bring to the table here because I have ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I also am an entrepreneur, so which can be very stressful. It can be an emotional roller coaster, and lots of fun as well. And I also am a survivor of post-traumatic stress disorder due to some really sad circumstances that happened to me. So that means that stress and burnout are things I've experienced in my life. And I think I can hopefully give an insight into some of the ways that have helped me to really get through some tricky times. So I'm going to go into all kinds of stuff today. I'm going to be very honest and open and quite vulnerable at times. So thanks for listening and being here. If you have a question, please leave a comment, or if you want to ask anything, I've got my glasses on today, so hopefully I'll be able to see your questions. But if I don't, then I will reply after the session. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk a bit about what is burnout. Okay, so burnout is a feeling that you can have where you start to feel perhaps alienated from yourself, from work. It can be that things that you used to enjoy, you just don't anymore. Perhaps you feel numb. You might feel a word that we use in therapy a lot, or in in post-traumatic stress communities, you might hear the word dissociation. So you might feel like you're not in your own space, in your own body. You might feel detached from yourself, almost like you're watching your life from the outside in, and that can be really discomforting. There can also be a sense of just not enjoying being present in any of your day-to-day activities, not really wanting to talk to friends or family. So a lot of these things I'm describing also can have similarities with depression and other mental health issues. So I just want to say that I am not a mental health practitioner or therapist. So please know that I'm not trying to share anything that I can't diagnose anything here. But what I wanted to say is burnout can have lots of different symptoms that we might see. So from a physical point of view, you might have a headache. You might be struggling to sleep, perhaps sleeping too much. You might be feeling overwhelmed. You might be feeling a lack of focus and an inability to cope. So this can be also linked to stress as well. So we also know that you may start to withdraw. So you might see that in a business or in your studies or wherever you are spending your time, you might find that actually your performance starts to suffer. And this can be a problem for both yourself, but also for your workplace. And one of the things that I found really interesting when I was looking at some of the research around burnout in preparation for today is that over 52% of the workforce is actually burnt out or feels burnout. Now that's up by 9% from a pre-pandemic survey. So that research was done by Indeed, and that was very recent. And I thought that was so interesting that it's up by 9%, but I actually think it's going to be even more than that, because what we have at the moment is we have an entire population of people, a global population of people that have been through something so difficult together for 2 years, not able to see family and friends. Many of us know someone who has passed away from COVID or other issues. So what we've seen is people collectively go through a global pandemic, wars, fuel crises, poverty, and watching, sometimes feeling helpless by watching what's going on in the world. And that can mean as well that we can start to become feeling not just burnt out because of physical exertion, because we've done so much or because we've worked so many hours, but actually emotionally burnt out by the news and the things we're viewing and the things that we're interacting with. And so burnout can be not just physical, but it can also be emotional. It can also be as a result of the emotional toil, of emotional labor that you're doing. And sometimes that can be something that you can do something about, like in your own family situation, and sometimes it's something you can't. So that was really interesting to me, looking over a few of those things. Now, what I wanted to quickly cover is the importance or the connection with burnout and stress and what the difference is. So stress is actually a very healthy thing for us. It can be very important for us. So in the past, if you look at Neanderthals, if you look at the evolution of human species, stress was important for us to know when to run from a predator, when to worry about our food circumstances, how much food we had, whether we needed to get enough food for the winter, when it was time to leave or flee a situation. So stress can be quite important to use as a catalyst for a short time. And so one of the things that we know is that, especially in a workforce, you cannot have prolonged stress for a very long time where people don't burn out. It's not sustainable. So that's one of the challenges that we sometimes see, is that people maybe, they maybe have the stress of a new job and a new promotion, and then things are going great because they've got this wonderful, new opportunity, but then they may start to become overwhelmed because it's difficult. And along that side as well, we also have the change curve, which you'll hear about in a lot of MBA modules around the importance of organizational psychology and how people and workforces are motivated. So if you never do anything stressful, if you never work outside your comfort zone, you'll never experience stress, because stress is doing something different. So actually stress can be so helpful for us, but it can also be really dangerous if not managed. And just a point that I wanted to say on that as well is there is a professor at London Business School that I found, he has a really interesting perspective on burnout. His name is Professor Richard Jolly, and he talks about burnout, and he says that it's actually an issue that we all need to take personal responsibility for. And this has completely shifted my perspective. So sometimes, and this might be in your personal life, or it could be in your work life, where we might say to ourselves, oh, well, everything would be better if that colleague just didn't put the heating on, because you're really hot and I'm so frustrated. Or everything would be better if my boss just would say hello to me every day, or everything would be better if they just did this or they did that, or they just didn't bother me anymore, or they sent me less emails. And he has a really important point. He talks about the importance of not using the word they, and instead thinking about what we can do. So for instance, he suggests that actually if you place all of your own beliefs onto what other people can do, what they can fix, it would just be better if they did that, then what you're actually doing is you're giving your power away, and what you're doing is you're making your entire world reliant on somebody else to fix it. And so he talks about that becoming something called passive dependency. And so what he suggests instead is actually taking control where we can and having boundaries. Now, I really just found that perspective so interesting, because in my personal circumstances, boundaries are something that is really new to me. You know, I, as I mentioned, have ADHD, and one of the things with that is we get so excitable and passionate, and you know, what I'm trying to do is learn to be more structured, and it's just something that's completely not natural to me. So hearing his perspective has been really powerful, because it's helped me to see that burnout isn't expected. You don't have to choose burnout. You don't have to choose the label of busy. You don't have to work all the hours in the world. He talks about being more outcome focused than and more metrics focused, but less about the you know, work effort. So what he's saying there is that if you have worked, you know, 60 hours a week, but you've produced one report, but somebody else has done 2 days and they've done the same report, it's about the report being done. Everyone has different ways of doing things, and sometimes we take different measures and ways to get there. So I just thought that was some insights that hopefully someone will connect with, and maybe feel inspired by Professor Richard Jolly, as I did as well. I just thought that was such a unique view of things. I think often we can, especially with burnout, we can be very kind and caring, which is so important. Kindness is really important there. But actually taking responsibility for our own burnout and our own situation takes a bit of guts as well. So I just wanted to introduce the topic and share that with you, and hopefully if you're watching, please leave some comments, please say hi. You know, I love to see who's here, and you may have your own stories about burnout that you want to share. Okay, so as you know, I am presenting on the Roadmap MBA. I studied an MBA, so I want to talk specifically for a little bit about the reality of studying an MBA. Okay, so I completed my Master's in Business Administration at Newcastle University Business School, and for me that was a dream come true. I always wanted to do a MBA. Part of that is possibly because when I was younger I quit my journalism degree, and so I didn't think I would ever graduate with an undergraduate degree. And when I did my undergraduate in leadership and management at Northumbria University, I just decided that, wow, I love this content so much. Imagine doing an MBA. So I thought about it for a number of years. I went to over 6 open days at Newcastle University Business School twice a year for 3 years. So that was, I was really keen. But one of the biggest things that I struggled with was how would I afford an MBA? And so, you know, that is, again, one of the big things around burnout, which we'll cover in a little while, which is financial stress. And, you know, it's something that causes a lot of people concern. So for me, I decided that I could do lots of different options. I could maybe do a part-time MBA. I could do an executive MBA, which is where you do a part-time MBA, but you're actually going into the university and studying with a university once a week. Or you might do things like you could do a long-distance course. Now, for me personally, I'm someone who loves to have a discussion and chatter and thoughts and the chaos, I guess, of the experience. I like to immerse myself in everything I'm doing. So when I'm doing something, I like to be there and just really in the moment and soak it all up. So I knew straight away that I wouldn't want to do the part-time MBA, because I knew that I would really struggle to manage a part-time degree and a job, and also because that would take 4 years, potentially between 2 and 4 years, and I wanted to get it done in you know, in under 18 months. So I knew that there would be a big sacrifice to do an MBA full time, but I never understood how big the sacrifice would be until I did it. And like I said, I'm going to get really raw and honest with you guys, just because I know that, you know, people don't always think about these things, so it might be helpful. I also want to say that I did consider a long distance MBA, and at the time there weren't really options like what the Roadmap MBA offers. There are, you know, some alternatives, but I just didn't feel that I found anything that I connected with at the time. And I didn't find anything that I saw that was officially accredited. So that was one of my big decisions about not doing a long distance course. So when you do an MBA, it is a course that I would say is a tremendous sacrifice. So what is different about it to any other masters? Well, part of it is that in the 80s and 90s, an MBA was all the rage. It was in management structures, if you had your hierarchy, because you often had quite hierarchical management structures in the 80s, you would often have people at the top who had an MBA, because not everyone had gone to university, and it was quite an achievement to have done that. And so to have put that time and effort into that qualification showed people that you had that piece of paper. So it was instantly, for credibility, something really worthwhile. At the same time, you learned lots of business theories and systems and tools and models that were very important as we were learning in that time. So an MBA is a globally renowned qualification people recognize and respect. And, for some people that is really important. And for me, it was. I wanted to have that sense of achievement. Why is it different to another master's? Well, it's a very specific program. It's known to be more intense. So for instance, some of my master's colleagues on other programs maybe who might be doing, international communications or a art program or very different courses, politics, I know they would have maybe 6 lectures a week, but then they would have to do a lot of reading and group work. Whereas for my program, we would have at least 2 to 3 classes a day, sometimes 3-hour lectures. You would have seminars, you would have networking, you would have special talks that you were expected to go to. So there was a lot of work to do in the classroom as well as outside the classroom. When I was completing my MBA full time, I was going into class for a 9:30 start. Often I was going to networking before class because I wanted to give myself the best opportunity to build my personal brand while studying. I would run off to a meeting at the lunchtime in the break with my colleagues because we'd be doing group work. And then I would also be going to more lectures, and then after class I would be recording podcasts, or I would be leading the TEDx Society as the president at Newcastle University. So I found that actually a full-time MBA was very intense. I also worked the entire way through my MBA, which is very unusual for a full-time MBA student. It's actually very discouraged, and it's probably one of the reasons why I experienced burnout and a breakdown, and I'm gonna share more about that in a moment. But I think one of the things to say there is an MBA is already jam-packed, regardless of the networking you might add, the personal hobbies you might add, the friendships, the family situations you might be in if you're a parent, and all of these different reasons. So for that reason, I just want to say that if you're going to study an MBA, think about a few things. One, your personality style. There were lots of my colleagues who hated the interactions in class. They hated the discussion. They just wanted to study and read the papers. So in that instance, it might be better if you prefer to learn in a solitary way to actually do a course where you are just learning and reading and writing your own responses, because you save a lot of time not doing all of that discussion. So I think an MBA is always going to be intense. You also are put together in a group of people in the classroom situation. So for instance, whether you went to Harvard or Newcastle University Business School or London Business School, London School of Economics, wherever you are, Cape Town University, anywhere, you will be in a mix of people that are from all walks of life and all over the world. And that's what I absolutely loved. I loved the cultural interaction and communication, because we clashed all the time, because we were put in situations where we would clash. It felt like a melting pot of different cultures and communities. And I learned so much about how to communicate with colleagues who have a different point of view to me. I discovered that actually for some of my Asian and Chinese friends, I was very outspoken, especially for women. And I discovered that other things, like some of my colleagues from the Middle East also found me outspoken and didn't like me standing up for certain things. And I just found it so interesting to examine my own values, my own thoughts and beliefs about myself. From other people, from other people's perspectives, from their feedback. So anything we say and do, we get a mirror back to us in other people's behavior. We see a different version of ourselves, a different way of seeing the world. And that's why I think if you are thinking about any course or anything in life, to have the opportunity to travel or meet people from other walks of life or with other perspectives, it's so helpful. And it's one of the reasons why I do think it's important not to surround yourself with people who think just like you. It's one of the reasons why I like working with Steve Pugh, who runs this channel, because every time I do one of these sessions, he gives me feedback and he says, "Oh, Ash, that was great, but what if you did this instead?" And that's helping me to be a better presenter, but it's also helping me to learn, because he picks up on things I wouldn't. At the same time, for him, he is a man and I am a woman, and I might see things that he doesn't. I'm more emotional, he's very process orientated. So one of the game changers for me has been when I do business now, I'm always looking for ways to be more efficient, on time, different, which are things that I've never been able to do before, but it's helped me to be much better for my clients because I can be more organized. So learning from people who have a different perspective to you is so important, but also learning from other cultures, and you will do that in an MBA classroom. At the same time, like I said, it can be better if you're a different personality type to learn from home or in a different way. I actually think that one of the benefits of the classroom is, if you're an activist learning style, then you are doing a lot. You are doing experiential learning. You're going into a lot of, consultancy situations where you might be working with live clients. But one of the drawbacks that I think of an MBA in the classroom is how much time you spend outside of the real world and outside of working. So I never anticipated the emotional and financial challenges of doing an MBA full time, and I just want to share some of those now. So that meant for me leaving a 30 grand a year job, which was great. I had a brilliant reputation, great friends, a good network of people, but I was making a big sacrifice to actually go and study. And in my case, I had worked my way up the career ladder at Newcastle University. I loved my jobs. I loved the amazing roles I'd had, but I had been always going through this cycle, which I realize now some of this is relating to burnout, where I was getting the next promotion and then I would be so busy and then I would be looking for the next promotion, and I never really gave myself to be in the chance to be in the role. And what happened is I kept looking for promotions, but I would take risky moves where they were open-ended. Sorry, they weren't open-ended, they were contract positions for a short time before funding ran out for a project. And so what that meant is, in my last position before I went to do my MBA, there was somebody coming back from maternity leave, so the position was always going to be refilled, and that worked out really well for me. But it meant that I'd left this fantastic job that I loved, getting to meet people from Newcastle University all over the world, to then doing an MBA where I wasn't earning anything. Yes, I was working every day. I was doing small things like meeting and greeting at university conferences, or doing all kinds of things, anything I could do to make money. At one point I was scooping out ice cream for student kind of like interaction points. So on campus, if they had a special promotional activity or a survey they wanted to advertise and you got free ice cream, there were things that I was doing like that. So I was earning, very little money for a couple of hours work to try and help towards covering some bills. So I didn't realize how much it would cost. So I wasn't earning for a year and a half. I also was very fortunate to have a partial scholarship. So I received a regional impact scholarship. So that was in recognition of contribution to the region in the northeast of England. So that was really, I felt really flattered and honoured to have that opportunity and to see some of the community work that I do be recognised in that way. But even with a partial scholarship, that was still, more than £15,000 to pay. And that was just for tuition. So what you'll often find with business schools in the UK is that sometimes international fees will be the same as UK fees, which I actually think is a really good idea, because it means that there isn't a us and them feeling in the classroom. Everyone's making the same investment, but that can feel like a lot of money when you've got friends who are doing a master's program and they're only paying £6,000 and you're paying, say, £24,000. So what I would say is that cost, that emotional cost of doing the course, knowing you're going to be so busy. And I really thought I tried to anticipate it. I really thought that I was, everything was in hand, but actually, when you are putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be financially struggling, you're going to be relying on your partner, on your family to do things to help you, but you're also not going to be around. So you're kind of saying to them, you're signing up for a year and a half where I'm not really here, but you're also going to feed me and support me and be my emotional support. That's quite a big ask, and I didn't realize that at the time. So I do want to say that, regardless of whatever your circumstances are, really think about your learning style, how you like to learn, your personality. Will you like being in the classroom? Will you prefer to be doing something at home or part-time? Do you want to work at the same time? And also think about all of the advancement and promotion you might have in a job in a year and a half to 2 years by taking that time away. Think about the financial progression that you will lose. And remember that you might graduate with an MBA, but it might take a few years to get actually where you want to be. I'm going to come on to that in a little while about how to recover from burnout, because I'm going to do that in quite a lot of depth in a few minutes, but also why an MBA is worthwhile and worth the investment and sacrifice. So hopefully you'll stay tuned and be here for a little bit longer. But I wanted to talk a little bit now about how to look after your mental health and well-being. So I'm going to share that now. So a lot of us, love to eat lovely foods. We love to party. We love to do things. And when I say party, that could be, at home with a glass of wine, or it could be, at a festival sober. It doesn't matter what your version of having fun is, but we all know that we can do some things to excess and we can, have fun. And sometimes it's great, but sometimes it can be too much fun. At the same time, we can also burn ourselves out by doing too much work and being too busy. So one of the things that I wanted to share is how to look after your health and your mental health to avoid burnout, because I think prevention really is better than a cure. Something that I found really interesting is how the changing dynamics of the current emerging, workforce. So I believe we're on Generation Z now, but feel free to correct me in the comments. But we've got, we've had millennials, we've had Generation X, we've had baby boomers, we've had all these different terms that we use to describe certain generations of workforces. But what we're seeing now as an emerging trend is that young adults in their 20s, maybe 20 to 25, this is what I'm seeing anyway at this age, are more interested in experiences and traveling, seeing things, going places than things. And it's a bit of a shift, because in the past what you would see is someone would go to university, they might meet their partner at university, they'd get married, they'd settle down, they'd start a family, and they would maybe work in a job for 30 years. And that would be it. They might get promoted several times. They'd be head of whatever function that they're interested in. And then that would be their wonderful life. And what we're seeing now is a lot of people are waiting until they're older to have children. In fact, there is actually some concerns about the amount of women who are waiting past 30. And the reason I say that is because I am a woman and I'm 33. So, it's something that I'm seeing a lot of, is women waiting to to start a family because they want to prioritize their career, their studies, and other opportunities. But as I was saying, you get to see people who are experiencing travel, who are experiencing, different things they want to do. They might want to go and teach in another country, experience another culture. They might want to do some gap years at home. They might want to do all sorts of things, start a business. And what I'm really enjoying seeing is that actually you'll find now that people have a number of careers, a number of roles that they do in their job, a number of interests that they have. This is really interesting to me as someone with ADHD, because you'll often see people who have the same condition I do. They've been, one of my friends is, she's currently a mental health nurse and therapist, but she's worked in law, and also someone else I know has done, legal services, been a barrister, and now is a public speaking coach. And so it's so interesting how you can just shift. But the point is, we don't have to be just one thing anymore. So there's a huge change in the workforce that's emerging. And so this is important for the future of work, which is often talked about in MBA classrooms. It's often talked about in MBA communities. So these are topics you might want to think about. But the other challenge is the issue of what does that mean for our workforces? Well, in terms of how to look after your mental health and well-being, you can do that at home, but you can also do that at work. So some tips that I found, which have been pretty game-changing for me, have been coffee and monitoring my coffee. I didn't know before being diagnosed with ADHD that I had an issue with focus and stimulation, but during my MBA I was actually having 2 Red Bulls a day, and that is really dangerous. It would have been really bad for my heart. My hair started falling out, so for those who might remember me from other networking events or things, my hair used to be blonde and I used to dye it. It's naturally dark blonde, but it started falling out because I was having bleach with it, but also I was drinking 2 Red Bulls a day, and I was feeling so stressed, it started to fall out. So burnout can lead to all kinds of crazy things, but I didn't know that I actually had a medical reason that I needed those stimulants. My brain was craving stimulants. And that was how it was getting them, was from Red Bull, because it has stimulants in there that I needed. So it wasn't just caffeine I was looking for. Before I was having 2 Red Bulls a day, I was having about 20 cups of coffee a day, which is a lot of coffee. So my point is, there's lots of things when you may be feeling stressed or just like something's not right in your body that might actually be an indication of things not being so good. And maybe you want to really think about that. It might be that you could cut your caffeine down. You could swap coffee for green tea. For me right now, I only have 1 cup of coffee a day. It's my treat. Sometimes I'll stretch to 2, but that is usually before 11 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm fortunate now that I do have ADHD medication, so that is my stimulants that keep me going. But I won't have caffeine much later than 2 p.m. because if I do, I'm not going to sleep. And what I've discovered is sleep is so important. So the importance of sleep, if you are drinking so much coffee, what I was finding, and you may resonate with this too, is I was so busy. I was so stressed. I had so much going on, and I wasn't able to concentrate or focus or cope, and I felt overwhelmed. So what I would do is I would just think, oh, well, I'll just have another coffee because that will help give me the energy I need. But then I would want to have a nap, or I'd want to sleep, and I hadn't been sleeping. And so what I found is I was in the cycle of not being able to concentrate and feeling overwhelmed and feeling stressed. And then I was over caffeinating myself with all of these, fizzy drinks or with coffee. And so what that meant is I was then adding fuel to fire, because what I was feeling was even more stress because the coffee would give me anxiety. And so or extra energy drinks would start to affect my mood. So I would say, check out your caffeine. I'm not saying give it up completely. I would be very sad without coffee, and actually coffee is a great, antioxidant in many ways. So please, enjoy it, but just be mindful about what you're putting into your body. On that note, nutrition is very important too. So during my MBA program, I don't think this would happen with everyone, but it was lockdown in the UK. So I was very sad that I'd invested all of this money, and then my MBA was cut off halfway. I was still studying the program, but it switched to an online learning program. And so what that meant is that actually I was sad a lot of the time. I was struggling to motivate myself. I didn't have the energy anymore, and I wasn't running around as much. So I wasn't getting any exercise because I felt guilty if I was exercising. Oh, I should be working, I should be studying. So what I was doing is I would just eat fizzy sweets, fizzy, jelly snakes, and marshmallows was a big one that I was eating a lot. Takeaways because I didn't have time to cook. Any time that I wasn't studying, I would feel guilty. And so sometimes even if I snuck in an extra, Netflix episode or something like that, I would feel so bad. And so what I found during my MBA is I would make excuses for things like going for a walk. I wouldn't go and do exercise, but I would sneak in some games on my iPad or something like that. And what happened for me is I actually put on quite a lot of weight, and I was heavier than I've probably ever been. I've lost 3 stones since then, which is quite a lot of weight. That I was really shocked that it was because I was just putting things in my face without thinking, not getting much exercise because everything was just about surviving. I was just in such a state of, I must get this course done. And what I want to say here is a lot of this could have been prevented by me really thinking about things a little bit more, making the time to go for walks, making the time to eat a bit healthier, to eat more fruit, to do little things to look after myself. So self-care is so important with burnout. One of the things we hear a lot is like, I get people say this to me all the time: Ash, I know you love the bath, I know you love to spend time with bubble baths and things, but that's just so boring to me. Self-care can be anything. So if you don't like bubble baths, that's totally fine. I'm more bubble baths for me. What I'm trying to say here is kickboxing is a great way to do self-care. Going for a run is one of my favorite ways to get rid of stress and anxiety. So doing something where you're able to just go for a run, do some exercise, swim is one of my favorites. Go and spend some time in nature if you can. Take your shoes off and walk on the grass, walk in the mud, be around water. We really love these things. And so those are really important things. But another thing that I love is being creative, having a chance to paint, to throw glitter at something, to do a community project, to volunteer in an activity that's outside of myself. Go and help at your local food bank, volunteer at a conference and give up some time and meet some great people. We all re-energize ourselves in different ways, and that's really a big personality thing. But making time for your hobbies, yourself, your health, and also your friends and your family is so important. I always find that whenever I'm feeling burned out, I often neglect my family and friends because I feel like I don't want to be a burden. I don't feel like I've got the mental space or energy. And we saw this a lot in the lockdown. A lot of people went really quiet and struggled to talk to their friends. But the challenge for that is that it can mean that people start to think that you don't care about them, and at the same time, you can think that your friends are upset with you when they're not. So we can make assumptions. And when you're burned out, what I've come to find is that actually it can be really bad for just jumping to conclusions where you might have thought about things in a totally different way if you were feeling more clear and rational and focused. So I wanted to talk about how to recover from burnout if you find yourself in this situation. So I would say that my MBA was one of the toughest times in my life. I had a breakdown. It's not the first time I've had a breakdown. So when I say breakdown, I mean I was at my limit. I was really exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted. I thought that in my head, it's going to be a year and a half. I'm going to get my head down. I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to try hard. You know, I know that it's going to be busy. I know it's going to be intense, but I've told my friends and family, they're expecting it. It's going to be totally fine. Now, what I hadn't accounted for, and this is something I've come to learn in my own business too, it's something I've experienced recently actually, is when you are making these plans, that's great, but you're not always leaving time for contingency. And I never in a million years would have thought we would have been going through a global pandemic where we couldn't travel and I wouldn't be able to see people every day, and it would just be me in my house or me and my husband. And that would be the only interaction I would have, apart from long Zoom calls back to back all day. So I couldn't have possibly planned for that. Sometimes we think we can do risk assessments, we can mitigate circumstances, but there will always be things you never expect. And so one of the things that I wanted to say is that if you are a student studying at any university, studying any course, there are personal extenuating circumstance forms that you can access, or support systems. There can be a student wellbeing service. In the States and in other countries, there are different terms. So you might not have personal extenuating circumstance. You might have student support or pastoral care. It just depends on what country you're in. But one of the biggest things you can do is ask for help. And that's also important in the workplace. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, I'm not a student, I don't care about, studies, I'm actually in the workplace, but I'm interested in burnout. That's important too, because asking for help from a manager can really go a long way. Now, sometimes you might not want to ask for help. Sometimes it might not be your manager that's the best person to talk to. You might not have the best rapport or relationship there. So could be a colleague. You could say, actually, I'm really struggling with this assignment, with this piece of work. I know that you're really good at spreadsheets. Can you help me with that? Can you show me the ropes a little bit? Or is there something I can do that you don't want to do? Could you swap? It's really important to ask for help, but also where you can do things that are you're good at, because that will help you to feel empowered. At the same time, you don't want to take away all the things that make you stressed, because then you're never going to grow. So it's a bit of a tricky balance. A good example of that is during my MBA, one of my top marks I got was for accounting. And I couldn't believe that. I got an 80, which is one of the top marks you can get in the UK. It's a distinction. But for that one assignment, I knew that I was going to struggle because I don't normally enjoy accounting or maths. So I spent 3 days in the library. I was probably there till 4 a.m. sometimes, but I was really getting my head down with no distractions, and it could really show in my marks. So even though we find things difficult, if we put in the effort, we can really achieve. But sometimes if you're burnt out or stressed, it's very difficult to find that energy, to find that resource in yourself and to actually do it. So what I wanted to say is burnout is not just emotional, feeling tired, feeling like you don't want to interact or work with others, or feeling like you just don't want to be around sometimes. It might be that you don't want to hurt yourself, you just would like to be invisible for a while so no one knows where you are. It could be financially burnt out. As I mentioned, an MBA is a big investment, but also life is a big investment. Things cost money, and there's always things to worry about, to pay. So actually you can feel financial burnout too, and mentally not being able to concentrate, not being able to cope, not feeling as clear as possible. But one of the things that's really important to me that I like to talk about is actually it's spiritual burnout. I don't think many people think about that. Now, you might not be necessarily religious or spiritual. To me, I think spirituality covers a lot of things. It could be something simple like looking at the trees and appreciating the earth around you and just looking in wonder at your surroundings. It could be writing a gratitude journal, which is one of the biggest things that I like to do. But having a connection to something, believing in something, even if it's your own values or the values of the people around you, that can be incredibly difficult when we face with news about wars and fuel crises and all these different things. So actually, it can be possible to be spiritually burnt out too. And that's why I think it's really important to, when we talk about recovering from burnout, yes, you can do watching your sleep, you can go to the doctor, see if there's anything underlying that might be wrong. Yes, you could have baths, you could go swimming, you could do exercise, but actually managing your energy, managing what you're doing and what's going on around you is important. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be informed, but maybe do switch off the news for a little while and maybe stop scrolling on your phone obsessively. There's lots of things like that that we can do just to protect our energy. So on that note, I wanted to share a very brief personal story. So recently, I found myself experiencing burnout again. And I was quite surprised because, you know, things are going really well. I'm enjoying being busy. I've got so many projects that I'm doing. But one of the things, again, I hadn't planned for was I was so busy. I was working hard and everything was going wonderfully. But then I had a family member go through something really difficult. And it was such a difficult situation. And it's not something that I could talk about online. It's not something that I could share in this video or in my podcast. It's not something I would even want to tell my friends or you know, family, because it's not my story to tell. But what that meant is, although I was busy, I had to do a lot of emotional labor that was outside of myself. You know, give someone a place to stay, make sure that they're safe, they're okay, they're feeling all right. And all of my energy was going into making sure they were okay, but then also needing to look after my clients. And one of the things I learned from that was it's actually really challenging when you are not leaving yourself any space for you, for breaks, for contingency, for other people. We don't know when our family or friends might need us, you know, where a loved one might need some extra care and attention. So what I would say is, I found myself in this situation. I actually received a complaint from a client. I was so upset because I felt really sad that I couldn't give them a better service. And one of the things the complaint involved was not being fast enough on my emails, not getting back to people. And what I realized is that's a way that I can be better in my business. It does mean that I might have to put in a little bit of extra time, which might seem contradictory to me talking about burnout. But what I've discovered is if I manage my time in a more structured way, and if I say no more, then I'm less likely to burn out. So one of the things that I've started to do to help me recover from burnout is to say no. Thank you very much, I can't make it. And no apologies required. It's actually a very valid sentence. No, that's all that you need to say. So I've started turning down a lot of opportunities where yes, I could be inspiring a group of young students, or I could be doing all kinds of different things, and I'd love to help. But actually, if I say yes to those things, then I won't be looking after the clients that I have. And so that's something that I would say is thinking about, you know, what are you already committed to? What can you strip back? What are the essentials? Because the better prevention you can do, the less you'll need to be in survival mode. And survival mode is just not, it's very difficult for us, for anyone studying an MBA. Again, you might have done this in organizational psychology or occupational work modules, but the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all have basic needs like food, shelter, but then you have other needs like, you know, friendships and family and that community. But you also have needs like work and for financial reasons, but work for fulfillment. And then you also have needs like studying or self-actualization. And you can't actually meet a lot of those higher needs if you're in a basic need circumstance. And that's why sometimes we might not even be in that space, but we might need to look after others who are in that space, and that can be really challenging. So I hope that story connects with someone, because I found it you know, it's funny, you come and do a presentation or you speak to people and you're smiling and they think everything's wonderful, but no one ever knows what's going on behind someone's life. You don't know who might be feeling burnt out, who might be feeling like they're struggling. And that's why kindness is so important. I learned so much from that client because they told me how they felt. And actually, this is why it's important to be clear with your communication and honest, because if they hadn't told me, that could have affected my reputation. They might have thought, oh, well, she just hasn't bothered. And that wasn't the case at all. I really wanted to be helping them, but I was so busy helping my family member that my attention was on, you know, really urgent family priorities. So it's taught me ways that I can be better. And I think what I'm trying to say there is everything that happens, there's something we can learn from. So my last thing that I wanted to say about recovering from burnout is I genuinely believe a gratitude diary is so helpful. I use one every day. I love to end the day thinking about things that I'm grateful for. Some days I find it really difficult, and it might be, hey, I had fresh water to brush my teeth with today. I'm so grateful for my toothbrush. It sounds so silly, but having gratitude just helps us to really reconnect with ourselves and think. I wanted to share a quick tip that I have heard. It's a grounding exercise. So if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling stressed, this is a really super short way to reconnect with yourself. So you might have heard of this before, but it's just grounding yourself with the 5 senses. So anytime you're feeling stressed, it could be before an interview, it could be something scary's just happened. Just take a moment, close your eyes, take a breath, and then think about your surroundings and where you are. What can you touch? Can you feel anything? Can you feel something on your skin? Can you feel the material of your skin? What can you taste? And it might be that, it could even be the saliva in your mouth. It could be, that you can eat something beautiful like a juicy strawberry. What can you feel? So we've said about touch, but how are you feeling? Are you connecting with your feelings? Are you angry, sad? What do you need to think about there? And what can you smell? So, is it the smell of nice juicy citrus? Is it freshly baked bread? What is around you? The smell of grass, trees, and what can you hear? So what sounds are around you? Is it bird song? Is it people shouting or chatting or laughing? And also, what can you see? So what can you see in front of you? Try to focus in on something. Oh, that person's wearing a blue jacket. It could be things like that, just to help you see something. So that's a really quick tip. I love doing that whenever I feel stressed. As someone with post-traumatic stress disorder, sometimes I experience flashbacks, which can mean that I can be just walking down the street and something can pop into my head that's really painful and difficult to think about, and it can make me feel disorientated, scared, lost, and I can feel like a small child. So I use that tool and technique a lot, but it's super easy and you can do it anywhere. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to finish with is something really positive. So why is an MBA worthwhile? Is it worth the investment and sacrifice of personal time? So I would like to say that for me, an MBA is 100% worthwhile. I do believe that you should really think about your situation, whatever it might be, personal, family, all those things. Save as much as you can beforehand. I would really advocate for that because you don't know what you might need. And I think about an MBA as not just a qualification. It is a piece of paper that is going to show people that you have a certain amount of skills and theories and abilities, but at the same time, it's an investment in yourself. When we started our masters, people said to us in the classroom to try and prepare us and tell us about resilience, they said that you won't be the same person when you leave this program. And I thought to myself, yeah, sure, whatever. I know my values. I'm very connected to myself. I'm self-aware. Of course, I'll be the same person. but you won't, because you go through such a journey of personal discovery, of business discovery, of professional discovery. You learn how to communicate with people from all different backgrounds. You learn new techniques, new tools, new modalities. You learn new language. So I find it fascinating. Sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and I'll start talking about the Asia Pacific region and this and all kinds of stuff around economy, and I just think, oh my gosh, where did that come from? I don't even understand. But it's been so valuable because it's helped me to elevate a lot of my vocabulary. I can articulate myself in a different way. It's really given me confidence in the boardroom if I ever find myself in that situation. It's helped me to be more assertive. So in my business, I've been dealing with some things recently where I've felt more assertive about my thoughts on intellectual property and what I want to do. And I don't know if I would have had all of that without my MBA. So I would say, if you're thinking about it or you want to do it, there's so many different ways you can do it, also including, studying the Roadmap MBA, which you can study at home. And I'm really delighted that with that program, you get classroom access. So you get to chat to Steve in a virtual classroom. You can ask questions. There is discussion. There are opportunities to make friends and connect with people. So you can do an MBA in many different ways, but please think about the personal investment, how you'll look after yourself, and remember that, we actually do have control over many things in our life that we don't think we do. And that's been a huge perspective shift for me. So I hope that's been valuable and helpful today. It's probably the longest session I've done, but I think it's a really important topic to discuss burnout. And it's just a last thing I want to say is also look for the people around you. If you've noticed somebody who's become a bit more shy, a bit more withdrawn, quieter, maybe not being as engaged, then also remember to look after your friends, your work colleagues, your family, because without each other, what do we have? So thank you so much for listening, and I really appreciate anyone watching.